You're listening to the Uncommon Life Podcast. Whether you're a startup or you've been in business for 10 years, this show is for you. Each week, you'll get mentored by business leaders who deliver valuable strategies, tactics, and tips on how you can pursue your passion without compromise. We'll show you how to achieve balance while sticking to your core values so you can have an uncommon life. Now, here's your host, Jimmy Fullerton.
Welcome to the Uncommon Life Podcast, coming to you from the Chattahoochee Valley in Columbus, Georgia. Today, I have the pleasure of talking with Rachel Schmidt. Now, she definitely fits the profile of an uncommon life, and you'll hear that in the interview, but she has a real unique ability to be able to adapt and immerse herself in a culture, and she turned that into a business, which is called Target Language. Rachel's also a facilitator with Coastalers of Columbus, which is a 9-week course for would-be entrepreneurs to help them to flesh out their ideas. In part 1 of this 2-part interview, we talk about the wisdom of starting small and growing a business organically through what you love, no matter what stage of life you're in, without borrowing a fortune. We also talk about overcoming the fear of starting and the importance of sustaining momentum. I really enjoyed this interview, and I'm sure that you will also. So sit back and enjoy. Hello, Rachel. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. So you just got back from a big European trip.
I did.
Right?
European extravaganza. I think. I mean, anybody who gets to just up and leave their life for like 12 days and just disappear.
You need at least 12 days.
I mean, that's what I did.
Yeah.
You know, there was a moment on that trip where I was up on like a hilltop hiking in the Cinque Terre, and I was by myself. Just, no one was there. It was just me and the earth. And I was just thinking like, I'm probably in the 1% of the population. Like there's probably not a lot of people who have simultaneously the time, the money, and the leg strength to get where I am at this moment, because it was quite a climb to get there. So, yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, 12 days. I mean, it takes at least, when I go on vacation, it takes me at least, 2 or 3 days just to decompress and forget about stuff.
Yeah.
What else did you do besides that?
Well, I ended up going to Paris. That was accidental or incidental to my reservation. I was going to Italy, and I was going to just stay in the Riviera for the whole time. So I was planning to go on the beach and hiking. But on the way home, I lucked out and got a 20-hour layover in Paris. So I had a whole day in Paris to myself.
Did you, what's the best restaurant y'all ate at there? Or did you go out to restaurants?
Yeah, we did some. In the Cinque Terre, it's kind of like all the same. It's what you'd expect. It's
okay,
seafood
pronounce
and
that
pasta.
again now. What is that?
Cinque Terre.
Okay.
Cinque Terre. So the word cinque in Italian is 5, and terre means lands. And so this is a special place along the Riviera in Italy where there are 5 little villages along a ridge. So if you were down in South Georgia, it might be like up on the bluff, over by Lake Eufaula or Lake Walter F. George.
Right.
And that's why I love it there, because I tell my dad it's the closest I've found to feeling like I'm at home, but being like a world away. Because there's water, there's hiking. It's very like not rugged, but it's very outdoorsy. Everybody there is moving and walking and being out in the air all day long.
That's important. Sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about your background. And what is your background?
Well, I went to University of Georgia and got a romance languages degree, came back home to raise family, have kids, all that, and got an MBA here at CSU. And meanwhile, while all that was happening, I was kind of formulating business ideas. So I started out as a missionary straight out of high school, and then that kind of rolled into the foreign language study and led into my business.
Missionary. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I grew up in the United Methodist Church here in Columbus, St. Mark.
My granddad was a Methodist preacher.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So I grew up like that, and my parents had been Methodists, and I don't know. I was always really good at studying languages regardless, like from when I was age 9. And then I was super good at school. So I thought I might be a missionary doctor at one point, but the med school thing just wasn't really in the cards. And so by the time I was 14, I had already gone on my first mission, went on my first airplane ever, and I actually took 6 total airplanes to get there and get back because we were in a remote part of Venezuela back in those days.
Yeah.
And then after that, I signed on to do a pretty extensive mission right out of high school. And so the day after I graduated, I got on a plane and headed to Yuma, Arizona, crossed the border into Mexico, and kind of started my career that way.
So you kind of knew what you wanted.
Yeah.
Early. You were one of those people that frustrate me. You knew what you wanted early on, and you just kind of went after it.
I did, but only conceptually, right? Because, clearly I'm not a doctor.
That's better than most.
Right. I'm not a doctor today, but I am a linguist. And the language piece, I always knew I wanted. And, getting invested in people's lives in a meaningful way, I always knew I wanted, So that's where the mission work translates right into kind of the type of business that I run today.
So that's a good segue into your current business, Target Language. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about what y'all do, who you service, who your ideal client is, and what the overall concept is of your business.
Right. So in front of me right now, I have this flyer that's kind of our fall, 2019 kickoff, and it says, "Do you see yourself here?" And so what we're trying to evoke this fall is like, who is the person who would belong with us, right? We're trying to create culture and community. And so we, at Target Language, on the face of it, we teach and interpret and translate in at least 3 languages. But recently we've rebranded so that we would be more open, like that people would even come to us for things that we currently don't do, but that we could do. And so we're always interested in kind of being part of a community that is continuing to build itself, right? So like the flyer evokes this imagery of like people who have tan skin and people who have black skin and people who have white skin and people who have curly hair and people who are young and people who are old. Yeah. Like we're trying to evoke like this idea that if you see yourself with us, you belong with us. And that could be because of foreign language learning. That could be because of a need to have a professional come and train people on site for you. That could be because you want to be groovy and learn to Latin dance like we do, because we have things for kind of personal and professional pursuits.
So it's more than just about teaching a language. It's about creating a community, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you had to tell somebody, like in an elevator pitch, really quick, what your business is, what would you say?
I mean, our tagline is speak, immerse, explore. So we're trying to take people from where they are and get them to be able to speak the language.
And immerse themselves in the culture. Wow. Mm-hmm. So how did you come up with the idea? How did you evolve into that idea?
Oh, yeah, that took
of doing
some time.
That?
So, my first business.
You got 2 minutes.
Okay, good. My first business was way, way, way back when I had my first daughter. I started Baby Bell's Room. And from that, we developed certain policies and procedures and like how we would talk to customers. And although that business seems far afield and has nothing to do with what we make money doing today, it has everything to do with like how we built the business, like at the heart of it. And so from there, we rolled into creating a little consortium of other business owners that were like-minded with us. Again, the how.
Consortium.
Yeah. So like.
Collaborators.
Yeah. Like other people who also likewise would be selling types of things that we would be selling. Because back in those days, we were selling a lot of our wares at vendor fairs, craft shows, things like that. And so what
did you sell with?
Oh, with Baby Bell's Room, we painted one-of-a-kind finishing touches for children's rooms. Like, remember back in the day, everybody had their kid's name on the wall, like spelled out in letters?
Yes.
That thing, right? We built little stools and little stuff like that, hand-painted stuff.
So you helped during the nesting phase when the mom was pregnant, getting ready to prepare the room.
Right. And everything about the origin of our businesses has always been really authentic because it is authentic. Like, I had a baby at that point, right? Yeah. So I'm sitting there going, what do I need for my room? And what am I not willing to pay somebody extra for?
Right.
What can I do for myself? And then turned around and see if I can provide that to somebody else. So that's back in the days of eBay, and everybody was test marketing everything on eBay.
Right.
And then you build your standalone business and you build your standalone website. And so like I said, even though that business has nothing to do with what we do today, it has everything to do with how we do it.
So when you say how, you're talking about what aspects have you translated to target language?
Like our messaging, like how we communicate with our clients has never changed. We always speak friendly, in a friendly tone with a professional polish, right? We always use a comma instead of a colon, because we don't want to come off too official with our clientele, because our clientele has always felt a little more familial than that.
Yeah, because you're trying to create a community.
Right.
So that makes sense.
Right. And we're talking to them about their kids, and we're talking to them about their intimate desires. Because even now, when an adult comes to me and wants to learn Spanish at age 42, let's say, that's a pretty vulnerable moment, because, you're 42, you probably haven't been in college maybe ever. And even if you did, it's been 20 years. And so there's that moment of indecision of can I do this? And so there's got to be a way to talk to that person in that space, in that moment of life where you're absolutely, we can do this. And not just because I'm your cheerleader, but because I actually have a system that's going to work. So it's empathy, but it's also relying on the absolute truth that we know that our system has worked for a number of years.
So what kind of people, I'm just curious about who are the people that you are attracting? What do you have a specific type of person that I know it's trying to appeal to a wide variety, but is there a certain type of customer or client that you typically have?
Yeah, what we've realized over time, because we also work with other startup companies in town, and so over the years of training other people like us, would-be entrepreneurs, I had to really reflect on that deeply. And I found over time that a lot of our clients are two-income families when they're putting kids in our program. We learned some things about that, and so we know who we're targeting there. But then for individual decision makers, like young men, young women who just want to learn it for themselves, we call those people dream chasers. And so we try to speak to them in a certain way that's different from the way that we speak to the parents of, young children. Because like I said, there's a certain vulnerability and there's a certain competitive advantage that we offer when you really talk to a dream chaser a certain way. For example, over the years, I didn't realize that the fact that I don't have Mexican abuela in my life doesn't mean that people don't want to talk to me.
What's a Mexican abuela?
It's a Mexican grandmother, right? I'm a white girl from South Georgia, as it turns out. I mean, you can't see me. This is audio only.
I see that white girl from South Georgia. I do.
Right? And so to some extent, I am exotic in the marketplace where I am. And to some extent, I am an oddball. I'm an outlier in the culture where I live.
You just say hybrid.
Yeah.
It's sort of like a hybrid of,
yeah,
you got some local flavor, but also you seem like you could be elsewhere. Like in Europe, I could certainly see you being there and being comfortable.
Oh, and on this trip to Paris, it was the first time in my life nobody spoke English to me.
Really?
I was so proud.
Does your husband speak? How many languages does he speak?
Oh, barely English, right? He's from Texas.
Okay. So,
yeah, when he's with me or when I have a student by my side, people just default to English. But when I was on my own in Paris, you're absolutely right. Somehow I have cultivated an air that I'm allowed to assimilate or be kind of a chameleon in a culture. And so for that reason, I think the dream chasers come to me. And I didn't realize that over the years, that it was my difference that made me an advantage.
Hey guys and gals, my apologies for interrupting, but I have something I want to share with you. If you want to recession-proof your life and be able to thrive financially in any environment, then I have something for you. It's a blueprint I use for business and life. It's a combination of what I've learned from my mentors and through my own blood, sweat, and tears over the course of 20 years. It contains 5 key principles that will transform and elevate your life and business if you apply them consistently. Believe me, if I had this blueprint 20 years ago, I could have saved myself a lot of time and money, but I'm sharing it with you now for free when you go to www.uncommonlifepodcast.com. You can get yours for free today. So a dream chaser, characterize a typical dream chaser for me.
Yeah, like a 30, 40-something-year-old person who meant to do something in life and didn't get to it yet, and wakes up one day and decides, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to learn Spanish. Or even bigger than that, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to move to Cuba 3 years from now. So I better go ahead and learn Spanish. And they call me. And it's fascinating. Like I'm on their ride. Or I'm going to go shoot some elk or whatever the wild game is in some South American country, right? And they want to learn Spanish just to be legitimate, just to go and not be just a total like insufferable blowhard who's just like, you know, doesn't know how to talk to anybody. So for whatever their reason or their motivation, they all of a sudden decide, and I call it groovy. Like when I wrote out the adjectives of my common customer, it's like there's something about them that just makes them kind of in a different flow than the rest of the world.
Yeah, it seems like those types you're talking about kind of follow the beat of a different drum. They don't follow the herd. So
yeah,
definitely like that.
Yeah.
What was one of the biggest challenges you faced in starting Target Language? If you had to pick one, I'm sure there were many, but what was the toughest challenge?
I think the challenges have really been at the break points, you know, because starting Target Language was almost accidental. A friend of mine got asked by a homeschool group, will you teach Spanish to this group of kids? Like we already have 28 kids who need Spanish. So it was almost too easy to start the business for me because my friend said, no, I can't do it. Ask Rachel. Boom. Business was born. So I didn't have to work at it. The transitions have been the challenge because now that you've got it, now that you've built a business or you've got some business flowing and you didn't even have to try that hard, when you realize there's a moment that you could grow or you could stay where you are, which really means you would shrink.
Take it to the next level.
Right. Those are the moments that are really challenging. So I didn't experience a lot of the startup costs and a lot of the startup like anxieties. Yeah. But again, if you think about it, that I started Baby Belle's Room years before that, it was a constant progress, right? It was a constant like evolution from starting first business to getting into the language business.
That definitely would appeal to a lot of people because that way you're kind of gradually easing into entrepreneurship and you don't have to just put everything you have up for mortgage.
God, no. Please don't do that.
You can just kind of, some people do that.
Right.
But I love the idea. And today, the way we're set up, you can kind of do a side hustle and start things and progressively work towards a point to where you can be independent.
Right.
If you're passionate about it, you can pursue it. So
yeah, and it's not that somebody couldn't put it all on the line and go, but your average person who just gets up in the morning and decides they're going to start a business could probably start smaller.
Yeah.
Could probably start with a test market, you could call it, right? Even if you're not going to go all the way, and buy the facility yet, could you do that from home first, right? Could everybody start from their proverbial basement or garage? And I believe the answer to that is yes, which is why I'm really pursuing like the goal of entrepreneurship growth here in this community.
Yeah. So speaking of that, you are a facilitator with Co-Starters in Columbus, Georgia. So tell me a little bit about what you do with Co-Starters, which is how we met.
Right. So Co-Starters is under Startup Columbus, which is, I think, just a division of the chamber at large. Yeah. In Columbus, Georgia, and it's been well-funded and well-supported by some really wonderful, forward-thinking people who just believe in the future of Columbus, Georgia. And that said, the people who believe in the future of Columbus, Georgia are pretty much in two camps, and I'm sure there's gray area in the middle. There's kind of the white tablecloth faction of Columbus, Georgia, who've had money, who've come into money, who've been wealthier and kind of controlled a lot of the donation funding in our community. And then there's another faction that's kind of like young and groovy and doing the best they can with what they got to work with, right? And so I'm sure there's lots of people in the middle. But, what's so amazing about Columbus, Georgia is that those people who have always had money and have kind of controlled that type of wealth have also always put it back into the community. And, you have to pause and think about that every once in a while, because you wouldn't have to do that. And you wouldn't have to stay. And if you had all the money you needed to do what you wanted to do with your life, would you choose to invest in this community? Would you choose to invest in your community? So say what you want about people being, old money or nouveau riche, like anyone who's willing to invest in this community is a friend of mine. So that's why I'm really excited to work with Startup Columbus, because the money is culminated from a variety of those types of sources. And also we're asking that the entrepreneur, him or herself, contribute, I think it's $200 to come start a course with us. And the courses that we're offering right now are actually out of a curriculum we bought from something that was working out there in the world around the country. And so we had those folks come in and they kind of came in from 3 different states and, culminated a meeting for us. And we all met together downtown and we were trained on the curriculum initially. And so now over time, we're able to take the ideas of not just Columbus, Georgia, and a few folks at the chamber, but these ideas that are working nationwide.
Yeah.
Right. And all they're doing is fostering, and pushing forward entrepreneurship in communities. And the way that we do it is at a 3rd to 5th grade level, which is pretty cool because that means you don't have to have an MBA to join our class. The facilitators happen to have an MBA, so we have that kind of a prowess in the room, but we really make it approachable for every person who has a concept, a startup, or a full-fledged business that they need to take for whatever reason to a next level.
So what are some of the things you try to teach these young or would-be entrepreneurs? And so basically what I'm gathering is there are people that have an idea. And you help them flesh out their idea. What do y'all do exactly?
Yeah, it's a 9-week course, and it's going to take them kind of from soup to nuts through the process of starting up a business. So it took me 10 years to get an MBA because I was busy giving birth to children and getting a household started too.
Yep.
But this person is going to go through this course in 9 weeks. And so it's obviously not going to be as deep as an MBA, but it's going to take you through identifying your customer. It's going to take you through setting up a financial plan, really doing the day-to-day accounting, deciding where your break-even points are, making critical decisions at critical moments so that you don't mortgage the farm, mortgage everything you own to start a $5,000 a year enterprise, right?
Yeah.
So that you really see it and you force yourself to sit down and ask the tough questions and get the right answers. But meanwhile, you have a community that you're building amongst the entrepreneurs in the room. And not only that, but now we're in our 2nd cohort. And so over the years, we hope to build a consortium, right? A collaborative effort amongst the various cohorts that have come through us.
So collaboration is like a side benefit. Well, not side benefit, but something that will naturally occur.
Right.
As you're building this community of entrepreneurs. I'm all about collaboration, but what are some of the biggest challenges you see from some of these entrepreneurs? What's their biggest challenge that they're facing right now? What do they have the most trouble with? Is there like a recurring theme you see that?
Yeah, it's overcoming it's not the fear of missing out, it's the fear of starting. Because we all have starts that we drag our feet about. Because while I started my business in my sleep, like falling off a log, right? That part was easy. There certainly have been decisions to make along the years where I still experience that, 800-pound gorilla, they call it. You don't want to pick up the phone. You don't want to make that call. You don't want to ask that next question, which has the benefit or risk of being the next best thing in your life, the next $1 million, right? But I think that's the thing that we find that all entrepreneurs share is the fear of starts.
Taking that step.
Yeah.
Yep. You got to take that first step and then just got to keep taking little steps. Eventually, if you keep doing that long enough, you'll come a long way.
And we believe that people like you guys, when you and Jessica came from Launch and, the guys from Nonic came, and we've really strategically positioned a lot of current, active business owners and entrepreneurs in the community to come to class. We really believe that that helps a ton with that fear of starting, because what's been so great is that when people like you guys will come into the classroom, the kids, the students, the would-be entrepreneurs are like, oh my God, they totally failed 10 times, or they made these mistakes in order, and still here they stand. Still here they are moving forward. And I think that you can't explain that enough to somebody.
I cannot agree more. I mean,
right?
You have to start and then be willing to fail.
Right.
And not get all crazy about failing. You also can't be a perfectionist. Mm-hmm. If you're a perfectionist, sometimes that will paralyze you.
Right.
And keep you from taking action. So that's a big thing that I see as well. People just not taking that first step. It definitely takes somebody that's not averse to failing and understands that failing is just another way to learn.
Right.
Quicker.
Right.
So what would you say 2 of the most important skills entrepreneurs have? You can think about that for a minute, but I mean, you've been working with entrepreneurs and you've seen some that have succeeded, and you have, and what would you say some common traits they possess that you've seen besides, obviously, we've already identified a willingness to start.
Right.
Not.
And keep starting.
Keep their momentum going. Like when we were doing this, we looked at the whole project, the scope of it, everything that we had to do. It was a bit overwhelming. So we had to break it down into more manageable chunks. And there were times when things would happen, we had to slow our pace. But as long as we could keep some momentum, which I can do a whole thing on momentum, but that's a huge part of it.
Huge deal.
If you lose your momentum and everything stalls, it affects you on a variety of different levels. But if you keep your momentum going, even if it's a little bit here and there, at least it does something for your mindset as well as just keeping the process moving forward. So
I would agree with that. So we could take that as one of them, because when we start the startup cohort each time with the co-starters class, we always ask them, how many classes is it appropriate for someone to miss before they've really not invested enough in this community to be part of it?
Right.
And we let them decide. And invariably, the people who don't keep that word, who don't attend enough classes, are the ones who are losing momentum in general. So it's evident in everything you do. Momentum feeds every area of your life. So it's like, if I get out of bed in the morning and I make my bed, when I get up out of it, I know I'm coming home to a clean canvas.
You must have heard that thing about the Navy SEAL who gave that commencement speech. It talks about first make your bed.
Yeah.
Didn't hear that.
Never heard it, but I've just been a real believer, in the darker days of my life, in the times when I felt like I was sucking wind and losing momentum.
Yeah.
I remember thinking to myself, if I can do one thing right, I can do this right. I can make this damn bed and I can go on with my day. And nobody can change. I make the bed where I lie in it. Even if I feel like things I've done are wrong or right, or I'm on my way, you make the bed you lie in.
I can control this.
That's right.
Dadgummit.
That's
as
right.
we say in the South.
Right.
I'm going to control this.
That's right.
I can still go to the gym.
Right.
I can take 10 minutes to do something,
That's right.
So
that's right.
That's huge.
The second one I would say probably has to do with networking, though. The skill that all people in entrepreneurships have to have is networking, right? They have to develop that ability to do themselves, be themselves, but get the heck out there,
Yeah. So that is the end of part 1 of my interview with Rachel Schmidt. If you enjoyed that, then please share this. And remember, you can get more content like this by going to my YouTube channel at uncommonlifepodcast.com. Now, coming up in part 2, we talk about Rachel's superpower, which is networking, or I like to call it relationship building. Now, she is one of the most vigilant and dedicated networkers I have ever met. And you'll want to listen to this because you can take away some really good practical strategies that you can apply to your business and really help you grow it. We also talk about collaboration, some of the benefits there, how to make collaboration important to your team and give them a hyper focus. We also talk about how to identify who to collaborate with and then staying invested in the relationships you form during collaboration. There's really a lot of good info here. You'll get a lot out of it. I promise you that. So please check out part 2. Thanks again for listening, and I really do appreciate it. I will see you next time on the Uncommon Life Podcast.
This is the podcastfactory.com.